to the Amherst County Board of Supervisors meeting. Let the record reflect, it is November 15th, 2022, and the time is 7 p.m. Our next matter of business is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or additions that need to be made to the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Drew Wade if he could lead us in the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we come to you with thankfulness in our hearts for the day you've provided despite the weather, Lord. And as we enter this season of Thanksgiving, let us keep in mind those that are suffering from loss and whatever the need might be there. Not all of us are coming in that season with a full family, so be with them, give them the comfort they need. Lord, we ask for your hand of protection over our law enforcement, first responders, and military as well, as they out there serving us every day. And Lord, we ask for your spirit here as we take on the county's business tonight, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we got a new sound system here. You can really tell. Seems like it's a lot louder than the previous system, so good job.
I can hear it, Mr. Pugh.
Oh, yeah, it's loud. All right. So next we have citizen comments. This is regarding anything that's other than the public hearings. We will have 3 public hearings tonight, but if you wish to speak on anything else, please come forward, state your name and your address for the record. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the citizen comments, and we're going to ask Mr. Martin to call to order the Amherst County Service Authority.
Thank you. At this time, I'll call the Amherst County Service Authority to order. Let the record show it is November the 15th, 2022, and the time is 7:02 p.m. Let's see. All right, the first thing on our agenda is the ACSA availability fees assessment. Mr. Hopkins.
Good evening, everybody. A few months ago, after a lot, this has gone on for a long time, but the Service Authority Board decided that a change was in order to the way that the Service Authority assesses availability fees. We've always done it by assessing the fees by the estimated amount of water that was going to be used by the applicant. Now they want to go to assessing fees by meter size. The Service Authority Board has already preliminarily approved this, and I think what's going to happen tonight is they're going to formally approve it, request the supervisors to adopt an ordinance to change the county code to incorporate this into the county code. The public hearing that's going to follow that, or just before that, has been publicly noticed twice in accordance with state law. So, and I think you all have a copy of the ordinance in front of you. So that's really all I have, unless you all have any questions.
Thank you. All right. Since this is a public hearing, is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? Mr. Kennan?
Good evening, Board. I'm Calvin Kennan, District 3. Very much in favor of this, serve on the Economic Development Authority, and I believe this will put us in a very competitive situation with our neighboring counties when it comes down to the availability fees. I am very thankful for the work that the Service Authority's done. I know you guys have put in a lot of time, and I appreciate it, and I think this will be a big win for economic development. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in favor? All right, if not, is there anyone that would like to speak in opposition to the proposed ordinance? Hearing and seeing none, the public hearing of the Service Authority is closed. Board members? Mr. Perry, do you have any comments?
I will make a comment before the motion, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a great example of working with the Economic Development Authority and listening to what they had to say about the citizen comments they received and how Amherst County could be, or the Amherst County Service Authority could be more business friendly. I'm really pleased that we were able to work on this, and I just want to thank the Executive Director as well as our Executive Director as well as the Executive Director of the Economic Development Authority for their efforts in pulling this together.
Very good. Mr. Woods? All right. I would echo your comments. I'd also like to thank you. I think you brought a lot of knowledge to this. I think we came up with something that was equitable for the Service Authority of the county and people wishing to develop and making it more friendly to do so. So if there's no additional comments, I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Amherst County Service Authority Board adopt ordinance 2022-12.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Woods. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye. All right. At this time, I'm going to close the meeting of the Service Authority. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And Mr. Pugh?
All right, thank you, Mr. Wood. Thank you, Mr. Parra, for coming out tonight on this rainy night. Now we have to do this ourselves with the Board of Supervisors. We've already held the joint public hearing, so that is over with. Now we need to have a motion from the supervisors to approve the ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Amherst County Board of Supervisors adopt ordinance 2022-12 as approved and requested by the Amherst County Service Authority Board.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, next we have special exception 2022-489, Amherst. Mr. Creasy, you'll be presenting tonight?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman, Board. It's good to see you all. Give me 1 second. I'd like to pull up my staff report, and we'll go through the proposed request that way. The purpose of this request is for Mr. Estrada for a special exception in the B2 General Commercial District. The purpose is to allow the bulk storage of sale of sand, gravel, and/or rock. That is the code section that I put in there. Mr. Estrada has a granite business and has bulk storage outside and will be selling it, and staff deemed that as a special exception to fit along with that statement from the county zoning ordinance. To start off, we're going to go over the existing conditions for the site. They're fairly, it's a fairly well-known site. Mr. Mason Cup, who is here, he's run an auto body shop out of this parcel for many years. It's 1340 North Amherst Highway. It's right before you get to Patrick Henry Highway, where you cut over to Route 151. It's roughly 2.232 acres. As I mentioned, it's zoned at B2 General Commercial, and it's currently an automotive repair shop. And the parcel is served by private water and private sewer. And I'd like to make note of this because the site looks great right now. This GIS picture is from 2018. Since then, Mr. Mason Cup has paved that back area, and most, if not all, of those cars are removed. There's roughly about 6 cars in the back, and that's just for your knowledge when reviewing this case. So moving on to show you the surrounding zoning district for this proposed case. As you can see, the property in question is zoned B2. It's in general conformance with the surrounding area. You've got B2 to the north, to the south, and to the southeast. We do have this sliver of R2 general residential here to the south. However, it does not adjoin it, so therefore there's no additional screening requirements since it's all adjoined by B2 general commercial property. Moving forward, we have Mr. Estrada provided us a conceptual layout for his special exception. He's indicated 2 separate locations for the location of where he would be storing these granite slabs out on site. This is his rough sketch, and I went ahead and I kind of put this onto the GIS to give you guys a better picture of what we're looking at here. So as you can tell, we got the building in the middle, and Mr. Estrada has proposed location for granite slabs right here where my mouse is moving back and forth. So this is 2 levels. So this is a wraparound drive to this separate building, and this is up higher than here. So he'll be storing granite here, and then also in the back. And as you can see, there's an existing vegetative buffer back here of, I would like to say that's Leland cypress, but it's some type of cedar tree. And now moving on to the analysis of the report. So as I mentioned, it's a bulk storage of granite countertops, and according to the property owner, the existing use of the automotive repair shop shall continue for a short time. He's not sure how long, so both the granite business and the automotive repair shop would be running concurrently if approved. And as I mentioned earlier, everything is zoned commercial around it, except for that single-family dwelling directly to the south. Staff has recommended a landscaping requirements to meet section 1605. I'm going to go over this a little bit later, but just so that you're aware of, the estimated landscaping requirements as a staff condition would be roughly 6 trees and 30 shrubs. That's going off of a measurement from the GIS, which is not to scale, which gives him about 250 feet of road frontage. In regards to traffic impact, I placed in front of all of you an email from Mr. Daniel Brown, who works with VDOT. I gave him all the information about what Mr. Estrada was proposing and what's existing, and in that email you can see that the existing entrance will suffice for the proposed use, so there will be no additional impact or work that will need to be done. And moving on to the recommended conditions for this proposed use. Lighting, that's pretty standard. None is proposed for this. However, if it was, it would be glare shielded and prevent illumination across property lines. Outdoor storage, no miscellaneous items shall be stored other than the granite slabs at the 2 established locations. Entrances, we just went over that with VDOT. Landscaping, as I mentioned, staff had recommended that they meet all requirements in section 1605, which is 1 tree per 50 feet and 1 shrub per 10 feet. And as you can see at the bottom of the recommended conditions, I have a little note here and like to make it known that Mr. Estrada's business, the way that he gets customers is from people seeing his product out from North Amherst Highway. So the Planning Commission had a discussion in order to hopefully not block his view shed from drivers passing along North Amherst and looking up at the property. And they had discussed the possibility of reducing the landscaping requirements in half to where he would only have to have roughly 3 trees and 15 shrubs. And they discussed that. However, the recommended motion by the Planning Commission to you all was with staff recommendations in which Mr. Estrada would have to meet all of the landscaping requirements in section 1605. So I'd like to give you that information. The Planning Commission would like to see Mr. Estrada succeed, and they believe reducing that landscaping would help him, especially with the view shed from North Amherst Highway and passengers by. And the last 2 conditions for the proposed request is that no more than 5 racks or 250 slabs of granite, whichever is greater, can be stored at either of the 2 proposed locations. The reason we set this number, Mr. Estrada first came to me and said, I only need 150, but we hope that Mr. Estrada's business is able to grow, and if he was to need to come back and have more outside stores because he was just able to blow up, which we hope, he would have to go back through this process. So after talking to him, we believe this gives him ample room in order to grow and to succeed in the area. And lastly, in regards to parking, no more than 20 vehicles shall be stored on the lot at any one time. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. I understand what the ordinance says. I understand the conversations that the Planning Commission had and some suggestions they had. Can we reduce your recommendation?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions at this point?
I'll have some later.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Creasy. All right, we will go ahead and open up the public hearing regarding special exception 2022-489. If there's anyone wishing to speak, please come forward. I know that Mr. Calvin Kennan had signed up. I'll go ahead and invite you up first.
Thanks again, District 3. But I was the liaison for the EDA that night, and it was a pretty fascinating discussion about Mr. Estrada's business. I think this will be a very valuable business. They bring in outside dollars. They could serve the region. When we went to get granite countertops, we had to go well outside this area at that time. There wasn't anybody like Mr. Estrada, and he had a number of people speaking for him. I think it'd be good to have a business on that end, and I think it's really important that you all would consider reducing the amount of landscaping. I believe, I was kind of shocked to find out today that it was not reduced. I guess somewhere in the discussion or the motion, something didn't get put through there, because there was a lot of discussion about working with him. And to me, I actually was pretty fascinated watching the commissioners go back and forth, doing everything they could to work with this business. I really think they were trying everything they could to help him. And just until today, I actually thought that that had been reduced. So if there's some way where he can show this off, I mean, I know that that exception is for rock, and I'm sure if it was a pile of gravel sitting there, that would be a lot different than these really nice granite pieces, and I think that'll help him as he tries to gain business as folks drive by. So I hope you all will consider changing this or whatever mechanism you all have to help him out. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kennan. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Just please state your name and,
Good evening, everybody. My name is Amherst Estrada, and I'm owner of the Next Day granite countertop business. And we here right now because, yeah, I appreciate you guys all do for us, you know. And what I want to tell you is, if we have more colors for show to the people, it's better, you know, because they got more selections, you know, instead of having like 4 colors, you know, because otherwise they had to drive all the way to where my provider was, like Chantilly, Virginia, and I don't want to do that, you know. I just want to keep a lot of color for them, you know. And and for the landscaping, you know, Mr. Bill, you know, he's the one who decide, you know, what they're gonna do over there, you know, because he's the owner of the property, you know. And what I promise to you guys, you know, we're gonna keep everything organized. You know, we're just gonna keep full slab right on front, and all the remnant pieces we're gonna stack it on the back of the warehouse, you know. And we're gonna try to keep everything clean over there. You know, that's all I have to say, you know, and thank you for your time.
thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Please come forward and state your name and district for the record.
Hello, my name is Bill Mason Cup. I am the property owner. You know, ultimately, I'm gonna make sure everything stays neat and tidy, and you know, you know, understand, you know, some concerns about wanting to hide stuff and everything as I dealt with when I was, you know, had a bunch of wrecked cars and stuff like that. But this isn't wrecked cars. I mean, everybody thinks something else is pretty. That's why there's so many different versions of everything. I am also, you know, with him on the fact that, you know, a bunch of trees and leaves blowing into wind and rain can have got, a lot of them have got different acids, and all these stones react differently to different acids. Like if a leaf gets stuck on a piece of granite, and all of a sudden you come in a couple days later and we're like, oh man, I love that granite, but that one's got leaf prints on it. I don't want that in my house. So he would have to eat that or sell to somebody else or something, which is the purpose of not having too many trees around the granite. You know, I think he's got it pretty far off the road now. You know, bushes, I think in the previous meeting, we were fine with a bunch of bushes, but we had gotten down to where we were putting a tree at the other end from opposite end of where there's a tree now. And up until lunchtime today, had no knowledge that it was not that version. Now all of a sudden we're back up to a bunch of trees and a bunch of bushes, and here we are. And, I really don't want to have to plant a bunch of trees. It's a lot of upkeep even once you plant the trees and have to maintain them, and the bushes. Don't mind the bushes, but the trees are what can create a lot of other issues. So I hope that we are business friendly towards this business, because he has had a whole lot of support. I think several of them were planning on coming tonight, but apparently there was another round of COVID sneaking in or something. Everybody's sick. So that's, and I am no longer running the body shop. I haven't been all year. I do still have a tow service. So it's not a joint effort. He uses the whole inside and actually wants more room to put other machines in there. So anyway, yeah, that's about all I can come up with on that one. So thank you for your thoughts, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Thank you, Mr. Mason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Anyone else wishing to speak? If not, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and ask the board if you have any questions, discussions, or, I mean, I personally think that it would be a good idea if we looked at the landscape ordinance here. I think it's, when you talk about 30 bushes and 6 trees, it's rather cumbersome. Visibility is very important, and I know Mr. Martin has a few questions, so I'll go ahead and let him ask those questions, but I would like to see something done in that regards.
All right. Yeah, Mr. Creasy?
Yes, sir.
So, a couple of questions, thank you. So, the B2 district, does it allow outside display or storage?
It would depend on the use. So, for instance, you know those sheds that you can sell, that's considered outside storage, and we require landscaping. We actually did a code change for that recently to require landscaping for that type of stuff. Excavation facilities, like storage of that stuff is allowed, but you got to screen it, of course. So we do allow types of uses to have outside storage, but it is a caveat upon the screening requirements typically.
So typically, if you're going to have outside display or storage, it has to be screened.
I would say yes, mostly due to the intense use of those proposed uses. I would say that the intensity of an excavating facility and things of that nature could be seen differently than this type of use, but yes.
So there's something special about the B2 district that requires screening of more intensive uses?
Well, I would say that specifically for Amherst County, because as you know, we have an extremely linear corridor, and it's very tight, so therefore a lot of our B2 commercial properties abut residential districts, so therefore we have that screening in there, so if a use does come in, we want to protect our citizens.
Okay. Next question. So I think fairly recently, maybe a few months ago, Mr. Bryant, you might be able to answer this, we did a special use permit for a garage and a car lot at Madison Heights and Dillard. And I just came through there a couple days ago, and looks like they've planted all their landscaping, right? And there's cars right behind it, right? So, you know, the fact that the trees are going to block the view and the shrubs are going to block the view, I don't really buy into that. I think the county has a standard for its landscaping ordinance. I'm not exactly sure why we wouldn't follow it. You know, I want the business to succeed too, but there's reasons we require special use permits for certain things in certain districts, and I think this is one of those reasons. I don't buy into the argument that the 6 trees spaced 50 feet apart and the 30 shrubs that anyone else would be required to plant are going to block the views of the slabs of the granite. I just don't. So I do not support reducing the landscape requirements. The other thing is about the number of slabs of granite, right? So we're talking about 250 slabs 250 slabs that may be placed in either location, right? So either behind the building in the screened area or in the front. So it sounds like the majority of those are going to be in the front. Now, I believe Mr. Bryant put some pictures in front of us of a Roanoke location, right?
Correct, I got those off
Well,
in
you-
the net,
You did that? Okay.
per the direction of Mr. Bryant.
So, I mean, this is a gateway into our county, right? So I have no problems with the business owner displaying his product, but I also don't buy into the fact that I'm going to be driving down 29 at 55 or 60 miles an hour, and I'm going to automatically see a piece of granite and say, I've got to have that piece of granite. Just not going to happen. I know there's a granite place there. I might see that there's a granite place there, and I'm going to go, and I'm going to stop and say, show me what colors you have. And you can very well walk me out behind, right, or while we're protecting the 29 corridor, and we've got these ordinances in place to improve our image of the county, which is one of the problems we're having now, right? Look at Masson Heights. We lost the Dixie Youth or whatever World Series it was because of that. And we want to continue just, for lack of a better word, circumventing our ordinances because we don't want to follow it. So I don't support that. I don't support 250 slabs of granite in the front. I think what's out there now is adequate, and that's what I would support. So that's all the points I have.
Thank you, Mr. Martin.
Mr. Pugh,
Yes.
I want to play point counterpoint with my colleague here, who I respect his knowledge of planning. He's planning director in Lynchburg. He's got a lot more knowledge about this than I will ever have. However, I do have a little bit of common sense. And I think that if you are forced to plant all these trees in a straight line, when you go out there in the spring and the summer and you start mowing your grass, you're either going to have to take a whole lot of time to do it, or it's going to grow up with grass around it, and there's nothing that bothers me more than see unkept lawns and unkept business grounds. It just drives me crazy. I did talk to Jeremy as well, and I said, does he have to space them all out, or is there any latitude there? And he said, no, you can actually do groupings. So he could do, if we went back to the recommendations that were talked about in the Planning Commission, he could do groupings of 3 trees at one end, groupings of 3 trees at the other, put mulch around it, have a circle, and just cut your grass real fast. It will look nice and neat, and it still upholds the letter of the ordinance. 2 more things. One, there's electric power line there, and Mr. Mason Cup, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I have seen them spray, killing the grass below them. Wouldn't they die then when they got sprayed, when the VDOT or whomever goes and does their spraying? Last thing though, I just texted one of the commissioners on the Planning Commission. He understood it the same way that I understood it, that what they had suggested, the more lenient language, was what was going to move forward. And so when I told him, no, that was not what was before us tonight, he was quite surprised.
And so I can speak onto that. That'd be a mistake on my end, Ms. Tucker. I should have stopped the public hearing at that process during Planning Commission and gotten clarity, because as Mr. Mason Cup said, they had a very lengthy discussion about reducing it. However, when it came down to it, the commission member just made a recommendation, they all went with it. And so I didn't second guess it at the time, and that was a mistake on my end. I should have paid more close attention to that, and I will definitely do that for future public hearings.
But we could have the opportunity to go back to what they had discussed here, right?
Correct. This is just a recommendation. You will have final say on what recommendations move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Creasy.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak?
I've got one thing I'd like to get clarification on, Mr. Bryant. As Ms. Tucker mentioned, they could potentially group the trees and whatnot, but if you look in the documentation, it said 1 every 50 feet. So can you speak to that, just to confirm?
Okay, and so the ordinance requirement is based upon your road frontage. So if you have, let's say, for this property, it's roughly 250 feet, you've got to have one tree for every 50 feet of road frontage. That doesn't mean you have to space it every 50 feet. That's just the minimum requirement is you've got to have one per 50 feet, so therefore 256 feet, you round up, would be 6 trees. And in creative groupings, and I'll also make another comment on that, you can actually replace one tree for 100 square foot mulch bed. So if he wanted to, I guess, do 600 square feet of mulch beds out there, that he wouldn't have to do any trees either. So there's actually a couple of options, creative groupings, mulch beds as well, to meet the ordinance.
Thank you.
All right, any further discussion?
I could definitely support the collective groupings, but not reducing the number.
All right, well, I personally think, I agree with what Ms. Tucker had to say. I think 30 bushes and 6 trees, that's a substantial amount of money. I don't know if you've been to a place like Rainfrost Nursery or some of these other places. You're talking about, you could talk about $5 grand planting that many bushes and trees. I think it's kind of onerous. We're supposed to be business friendly. I'm going to go ahead and make the motion that we approve special exception 2022-489 with the 3 trees and 15 bushes. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Pugh, could you add to that the grouping language? So perhaps they could group half of them at one end and half at the other?
And that's actually in the ordinance, so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bryant.
All right. There's a motion on the floor. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Next, we have special exception 2022-511, Partridge Creek Solar LLC. Mr. Creasy?
Yes, sir. All right, good afternoon again. This is a request by Sun Tribe Development LLC for a special exception in the R1 Limited Residential District. The purpose of this special exception is to allow for a utility-scale solar generation facility. And just as I did on the previous public hearing, we're going to go through the staff report, and we'll start with the existing conditions. So as you can see here, the proposed project would be located on Isaac Walton Road. I have that marked here, and as you can see here, here's Monacan Parkway, also known as the bypass. So the owner information covers it up a little bit, but they have a little bit of frontage right there on Monacan Park. Not much, because VDOT's right-of-way extends past a little bit, but it's right in the general vicinity. And existing to this, there's also an entrance off of Burks Road that comes in off of Bob White, if I'm not mistaken, and that has also access to the property. In total, it encumbers 141.332 acres, and as I mentioned, it's zoned R1, is currently vacant, and has been recently timbered by the property owner. Sorry, speaking on the mic. It's currently, the future land use designation indicates as low-density residential and agriculture limited. I have a slide on that here in a second. It is in the designated growth boundary for public water, about 70% of it is, but it is not in the designated growth boundary for public sewer. As you can see here, we have our current zoning map and our future land use map. The yellow is our R1 limited residential, and as you can see, about 99.5% of it, no, that's a guess of course, is zoned R1, and then you have a little sliver up at Burks Road, which is zoned A1 agriculture residential. In regards to the future land use map, as you can see, we've got that purple line coming right down the middle. That is our line for the designated growth boundary for public water. So you can see roughly about 65% of the property is in it. But future land use indicates this parcel as being low-density residential and agricultural residential. So moving on to the conceptual layout of the solar farm. So as you can see here, so I'm trying to get into the mic too. We've got Isaac Walton Road here, so they would have a proposed access entrance road off of Isaac Walton, and also a proposed access road off of Burks Road, as I mentioned, which comes off of Bob White. The proposed project would have three different separate locations. So you'd have one location of solar arrays here, another one here, and the third one would be in the back. Partridge Creek is really the natural separator of these different areas. Partridge Creek runs right through the middle, and they've been deemed wetlands by the engineer working on the project, and we'll go over that in a little bit. And as you can see, all of the solar arrays meet the 150-foot setback. That is that shaded little buffer area going all the way around. And then in the middle where you kind of see the little dots, that's going to be your wetland area. So of course, no solar arrays are proposed in that type of topography. Here is another conceptual layout. Your teal right here, that's going to be the location of your solar panels. The green line around it is your vegetative buffer. And then you can also see a little gray line to the northwest of the property, and that is an access road. The applicant is working with the Virginia Department of Transportation to determine the means of coming off Burks. If that's not plausible, they already have some type of documentation, which is included in your packet from VDOT, that an entrance off of Isaac Walton will suffice, and that they could have an access road all the way to the back. It would only hinder and include a little more disturbance in the wetlands, what would be taken care of by the Army Corps of Engineers and DEQ. So going over a quick analysis of the report, I've run down most of it, but there are some key things that I'd like to hit over with you guys. So the project shall not exceed 10 megawatts in total, and it shall be interconnected to Appalachian Power's 12 kV distribution system via an attachment facility located at the northwest of the site. If you remember at our previous solar panel, they actually had to do some work in order to connect into their solar grid. For this one, it should be fairly simple with no grading work or any extra construction. In addition to this, approximately 90 to 95 acres of the 141-acre site will be included in the proposed development. Roughly 30 to 35 acres will be devoted to solar arrays, or 60 acres will be devoted to solar arrays, and roughly 30 to 35 acres will contribute to the fenced-in facility. As I mentioned, the entire facility will be fenced in with a 7-foot tall fence. That is a federal requirement and also a local requirement. The PV panels are electronically connected and mechanically mounted on a racking equipment system, so therefore they tilt with the sun, which should reduce the glare onto neighboring citizens. And lastly, all setbacks of at least 150 feet are proposed. In regards to the comprehensive plan, with the latest update that you just had, underneath land use goals, objectives, and strategies, you guys included a section stating that solar generation facilities that are located in areas that do not have a negative impact on adjoining property or in Amherst County should be considered. So that's to take into consideration when listening to this proposal. In regards to traffic, the Sun Tribe Development has hired Dewberry engineers, and they've put together a memo in your packet which you can look over, and I also have an email from Daniel Brown indicating that a proposed entrance for the proposed use can be met with what they have to work with in regards to site distance and all those requirements. And lastly, we'll go over the conditions, and these are pretty typical from our last solar project. The first is that the use shall be in general conformance with the approved site plan. Lighting, no lighting is proposed. However, if it is, it shall be directed as to prevent illumination across property lines. There shall be no outside storage. All entrances shall meet VDOT requirements, and they shall obtain all necessary permits from them. Landscaping, this was in addition, the Planning Commission made an additional recommendation in this. The site shall maintain existing trees and proposed trees as shown on the conceptual site plan. Should any screening trees cease to exist during the life of the proposed solar farm, such trees shall immediately be replaced at the start of the next planting season. In addition, for any portion of the parcel that fronts along Monacan Parkway, the vegetative buffer shall be increased to 40 feet in depth. Right now, it would be considered a 20-foot buffer. Planning Commission recommends 40 feet. And planting shall be on 10 foot on center. The last couple of conditions in regards to parking, no more than 20 cars. Don't foresee that minimal traffic for this type of use. And then lastly, all necessary environmental approval shall be obtained prior to issuing of the zoning permit. The county recently signed into agreement with DEQ that now they review all stormwater and E&S plans for solar projects that are over 10 megawatts. So they will review the environmental side of this along with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Are there any questions for staff?
Questions? Is the applicant here? Would the applicant like to come up, or, all right?
They have a little presentation for you guys.
Okay, we will invite them up now so they can do their presentation.
Good evening, Supervisors.
Good evening.
Thanks for having us here. My name is Daniel Band. I'm with Sun Tribe Development. Just a little bit about ourselves. We're a solar company headquartered in Charlottesville. We have over 80 employees in the area. Together we have about 20 gigawatts of collective experience in renewable energy. So we've done a lot of projects in Virginia. We have a lot of experience working with DEQ and other state agencies. We're a developer of ground-mounted solar projects between 3 and 150 megawatts. So I'd say on par, this is one of the smaller projects that we do. And then we're a Virginia-based company supporting jobs within the state through workforce development programs. So we've co-founded a program called SHINE that helps to get the workforce trained up to work on these projects and to bring new jobs to Virginia. So just giving you an introduction to the project team, you can see I'm over there on the right. I'll be the project developer and permitting lead. We also have Avery Clemens here, our development engineer. Trevor Francis, our VP of Engineering, is also here, and then Jeff Suttle, who's also VP of Development. So just jumping right into a project overview. This is a 10 megawatt project producing enough electricity to power about 2,500 homes a year. The project uses about 90 acres out of 141 acres under agreement, and the remaining 50 acres generally comprise wildlife corridors, vegetative buffering, and setbacks from neighbors' roads and wetlands. The solar panels occupy less than half of the acreage under site control, so that's 65 acres. And the project generates electricity without producing noise or emissions. It's really minimal traffic when operations occur, and there's no permanent on-site lighting. So looking at the benefits to the county, so we're looking at $563,000 in direct revenue over the lifetime of the project. That comprises about $212,000 in estimated machinery and tool tax, and $350,000 in estimated real property taxes. You can compare that with the use as it's currently on site. Over that time, it would be about $87,000 in taxes, so we're about 7.5 times what it would be generating otherwise. There's also substantial indirect revenue that includes jobs created during construction. So that's installers, contractors who we hire for fencing needs, those types of things. There's also money spent on local goods and services. So for example, hotels, restaurants, stores, there's a lot of money spent as part of development of these projects. And then unlike other project development on site, this doesn't draw on county services or infrastructure. There may be minimal service needs, but generally, you won't need any extra roads, schools, water, sewer, those types of things. So one thing that we really worked on as part of our project development here was making this community focused and making sure that we have the buffering and setbacks we need to make sure that the impacts are minimized on neighbors. So as part of that, we're using existing vegetation within the buffers. We'll retain that, and where needed, we'll supplement it with Virginia native vegetation. That'll be evergreen vegetation, and we've shown that on the site plan, especially over on the Isaac Walton side. We're proposing vegetation, but really anywhere that there's a residence, there will be extra vegetation essentially put there to make sure they're screened. All setbacks from lot lines meet or exceed the 150 feet required by county ordinance. The panels are set back an even greater distance from the residences, so generally that's 250 feet or more. Oftentimes, that's 400 to 500 feet, so we're given a really good setback to any neighbors. We also submitted 2 things to the county to make sure that what we're doing does minimize the impacts on the neighbors. The first thing was the viewshed protection plan. And that was essentially going around on local roads, taking pictures of any screening that's currently there, and then engaging with county staff to make sure that we're proposing evergreens and screening that's going to appropriately screen those areas that don't have appropriate screening. The second thing that we submitted was a solar glare analysis. This was done by a third party, so it was Capital Airspace Associates. They used a tool from the FAA that essentially looks at the panels and how it reflects glare to anything around it. So they were looking at every house that's adjacent, first and second stories, all the roads, and then also any planes flying over. What they found using that methodology was that there wasn't going to be any glare. It helps that the tracking system generally reflects up towards the atmosphere, but these panels are also coated in anti-reflective materials, so that there's even less reflection than there would be otherwise. Then as part of feedback from the Planning Commission, they recommended doing more screening along Route 29. We put that in this updated site plan. So we'll be doing screening there, and then obviously around all the adjacent residences as well. So jumping into environment and wildlife, this was something that we also focused on in developing the site. As part of that, we're implementing a wildlife corridor along Partridge Creek. So you can see in this area, especially where the wetlands grow a little bit bigger, there's no fencing in that area, so essentially wildlife can have free passage through the site. This is generally 100 to 150 feet, so it's a pretty large passage, and that'll allow them to essentially move freely through the site. We're also maintaining a 50-foot setback from field surveyed wetlands and streams where possible, and we're using Virginia native grasses and pollinator-friendly wildflowers where practical. And we're given priority to the wildflower plantings along Isaac Walton, essentially to make it an aesthetic benefit to those neighbors over there. And we thought we should mention as well, this project will be reviewed under the multi-agency DEQ permit by rule process. So in terms of ensuring review and protection of wildlife and cultural and historic resources, there are added layers to make sure that that is done. So then jumping into construction, operation, and decommissioning. Construction is estimated to be about 4 to 6 months in duration. We'll have a traffic management plan as part of that, which will establish limited delivery hours, so trucks won't be running throughout the whole day. They'll be at certain times to minimize impacts on neighbors. And then there will also be a public liaison to coordinate with those neighbors. So if the neighbors have any concerns, if there's something happening that they think shouldn't, they'll have someone to call to make sure that they get their issues resolved. In terms of operation, like I said before, this is really low impact. There's no off-site noise, no emissions, no lighting. Very limited traffic, averaging 1 to 2 trips per month. So it's generally a pickup truck going to investigate something if something happened, but it's really low impact overall. And the facility is monitored remotely 24/7. So if something happens, we'll know about it, and we'll send someone out to remedy it. Looking towards the end of the project, so decommissioning, the project will be decommissioned at the project owner's expense, so that's our responsibility. Materials will be recycled, salvaged, or repurposed, and we will be posting a bond that's part of the county ordinance, so there will be funds there for when they're needed. So my last slide, then we can have some questions. Just takeaways. This is a real benefit to the county. It generates substantial tax revenue without having any infrastructure needs from the county. It's a community-focused design, so it will panel setbacks of 200 to 300 feet or more. We've built in wildlife protection, so that includes that wildlife corridor that runs through the site. And then there's many additional safeguards. So not only do we have to get permits through the county, but We also have to meet county conditions for final site plan approval, meet state requirements as part of the PBR process, meet state and erosion and sediment control requirements, and then also county, state, and federal wetland regulations. And my last point I'll make is, this is really low impact compared to some of the other alternatives. Unlike some of the other alternatives, including housing, short-term tourist rentals, solar produces no off-site noise, there's no emissions, virtually no car traffic, and it generates tax revenue without the need for county services. So with that, I'll step away from the mic and take any questions.
All right, I had a question. What is the life expectancy of a project like this?
Great question. So generally, we're looking at 30 to 40 years. So we sign a contract with the landowner for 30 years, and then there's potential extensions. But when we essentially have a contract with AEP APCO, they're looking for 30-year contracts for power.
Oh, so the panels, that's the life on the panel?
So the life is generally 40 years. It can oftentimes be longer than that.
The property's been timbered, and has it been timbered? I mean, all the timber's gone, so when you go to plant the buffers, what type of trees will you be using? Are you going to have to bring in larger trees, or are you going to plant saplings? That's kind of the question I have regarding your buffer.
Sure. So it has largely been timbered. There have been some trees left, mostly around the perimeter and then around streams. The trees have grown back to a certain extent. It's been a year and a half, 2 years since it's been timbered. But we'll be looking to plant evergreens, and generally that's between, I think, 3 and 6 feet as required by the ordinance.
Questions, board?
I've got a couple. So why this site? Out of the entire county, why did you choose this one?
Good question. So generally what we're looking at in terms of siting projects is where the infrastructure is. So around this site, there's a really good line. Oftentimes, you'll have a good big site, but there won't be lines or there won't be a substation nearby. So infrastructure is a really important thing for us in terms of where we're siting it. We're also looking for projects or properties that have certain acreage. So, we couldn't go into a property that was 20 acres, for example. It needs to be a certain acreage, and then also a certain slope. So this is somewhat sloped, but it's not sloped to the extent that we couldn't build on it with current technology. And then we're also looking at some other variables. Are there wildlife concerns? Are there cultural, historic resources? We didn't find any on this site. So all around, this was found to be a pretty good site.
And I think you showed a slide of how much energy this produces and how many homes. What percentage of that actually stays in Amherst County, or does it go to other areas?
Yeah, it's a great question. So essentially what we're doing is tapping onto APCO's lines. So it goes onto the grid. Just by kind of the sheer physics of it, it would be consumed at the nearest point. But, once it's on the grid, it goes potentially to the whole APCO grid, which is, central and western Virginia.
I imagine that's quite a bit of landscaping you're going to have to plant, right?
That's correct. Yep. We are proposing quite a bit, especially on Isaac Walton, around Burks Road, and then Route 29.
You're doing that because it's required, or just because
We're doing it, obviously it's required by county ordinance, but we spoke to the planning staff and decided with them that we were going to plant a little bit more in terms of buffer widths than was required by ordinance. So just to be a good neighbor, make sure that we are minimizing impacts.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Are there any anticipated costs to the county or the citizens as far as, the material you need, hardware, any of that?
No, sir, there's not.
All right, well, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we will go ahead and open the special exception 2022-511 Partridge Creek Solar LLC. We have a sign-up sheet here. The first person to sign up is Skylar Zunk. And if you could please state your address or district for the record, please.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Skylar Zunk, here representing a nonprofit founded not too long ago called Energy Right. I'm not a resident of the county, but we're trying to have a statewide presence anywhere where clean energy conversations are taking place. My colleague Blake Cox and I founded this organization to bring a conservative voice to the clean energy discussions happening across the state. As Mr. Bryant probably knows, it's a big topic in several counties. It's a big topic at Virginia Association of Counties Conference earlier this week. It's happening everywhere. We want to make sure there's a voice for rural conservatives at this table. As an organization, we're an all of the above type of organization. We helped the governor with his energy plan that he announced just south of here last month. We love his all of the above approach. We think renewables deserve a share of the discussion, a share of our energy grid, and we think solar can be a phenomenal neighbor in areas where it's sited correctly. Had the chance to talk with your planning commission and attend the hearing last month. Really was impressed by their thoughtful questions. We want these projects to be the best neighbors possible. They can operate without you really knowing they're there when they're behind that vegetative buffer. They asked about setbacks from roads. They asked about view shed and vegetative buffers. I myself am a neighbor to a utility scale project, and once it's built, we won't be able to see it from our homes because it's well screened and well buffered. One thing we talk about all the time is property rights. Your right to use your land how you see fit, as long as you're not adversely affecting your neighbor. We believe that to the fullest extent. We need to make sure that these projects go through if the landowner wants that to happen and not adversely affecting your neighbor. One thing I'd also like to leave you with is the topic of energy independence. We think it's only a good thing if we're producing more clean, cheap electricity on our side of the grid rather than having to import energy from other states or from other countries. So appreciate the work you all are doing. I know this is like a solar project number 2 within the county. Appreciate your consideration, and said this back in August, I guess, but if there's anything that Energy Right can do to help the county with a lot of these conversations, we'd be happy to do so. So thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Ginger Berg. You could state your address or district for the record, please.
Ginger Berg, District 1. Good evening, board. I would like to speak to you about possibly considering the approval for the solar farm over on Isaac Walton Road. I'm a big proponent of all of our rights here in Amherst. Everybody stands up for our rights, from our gun rights before with the Sanctuary County to parental rights on the school board, which I'm on, and also property rights. And, you know, I'm very proud to live in a county that does stand up for our rights. And again, I would like to ask you for your consideration of approving the solar field. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Timothy Forrester. And if you could, just place your address or your district, please.
236 Lowell Drive, Madison Heights. Just want to say, like, when I was a kid, I grew up in Virginia Beach. I was in Norfolk. I was in Hampton. I was Newport News, all over the place. And the reason my dad moved so much is because every time he would get a house, it would grow. And then be more houses built on top of it. You could reach out the window and touch the house right next door. And we moved here to get away from that. It's obvious that the owners want to do something with this land. I would much rather have a solar farm go there than a housing community. It's going to bring more traffic on Isaac Walton. It's going to be more accidents. I have a trucking company, and I've delivered to solar farms before. And they're out of sight, out of mind. I've had my trucks go in there, and I'm wondering if I'm lost. If I'm even going to be at the right place, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it opens up, and there's the farm. So it's going to be out of sight. Neighbors won't even know it's there. So, plus it means it's going to bring energy to Amherst County, too. So, I mean, less traffic. He says 1 or 2 cars a month going in and out of there versus, like I said, a housing community where it's just increased traffic. And then I'm sure, I know myself, I wouldn't want houses built on top of me either. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Stuart Bennett. could, just state your address or your district.
Yeah, good evening Supervisors. I'm Stuart Bennett from Madison Heights. And when I first heard about this project, I was so excited. I mean, to have a solar farm here in this county, I think is just remarkable. You can tell by my accent, I was not born and raised in Virginia, but I've lived in Virginia for more than 30 years. I grew up in the UK when the coal mining industry, the shipyards were all closing down, and people were freaking out because what are we going to do? Where are the jobs? What's going to happen? Amherst County, with going ahead with this project and moving into the 21st century where we're supposed to be. What happened in the northeast of England was they had to retrain jobs. They had to bring in new industry. A lot of it was electronics, car manufacturing. You're talking about steel workers and coal miners having to be retrained. This is the future, ladies and gents, and I'm absolutely 100% behind it. And I think if you, ladies and gentlemen, approve this, you're going to have a landmark and you're going to have something to be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak?
Chairman, before the meeting started, I placed a letter in front of you all from a neighboring property. That letter is speaking in favor for the project. Just wanted to make you aware.
All right. Anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Board, are there any questions? If not,
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve special exception 2022-511 with the planning commission's recommended conditions.
there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have the consent agenda. Are there any questions regarding the consent agenda? I will have to abstain from the minutes of November 1st. Was not here.
I move adoption of the, well, let's just break it out.
All right.
Move adoption of the minutes of November 1st, 2022.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I will abstain.
I'm going to abstain as well.
All right. Okay, next we have we'll go ahead and group the other two together, the appropriation of revenue and the budget transfer of expenditures. Both are on the Amherst County Public Schools. I make a motion we approve of both of those items. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 8, we have a commemorative resolution to honor Dean Rogers. I was asked by Ms. Tucker if she could present this, and I said, of course. So I'll go ahead and give the floor to you, Ms. Tucker. Oh.
Yes, Mr. Rogers, come forward.
We need to approve it first, don't we? We need to approve it.
Oh,
All right.
false alarm.
Yeah, false alarm, we have to improve the resolution. I will go ahead and make the motion that we approve the commemorative resolution 2022-7-CR. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, carry on, Mrs. Tucker.
Would you ask Mr. Rogers to come forward?
Mr. Rogers, could you please come forward?
It's my pleasure to be able to present this resolution to Dean. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your privilege here. I know it's something that the chair normally does. Thank you, board members. But as a senior member here, I had interviewed him and worked with a number of county administrators throughout my time here with the county. I think I tried to count them, and it was probably, I think it was 6 county administrators I've worked with. I can say without hesitation that Dean Rogers has been the best. And the county has benefited from his vision and his leadership. As I got to know Dean, I saw what was evident in his resume. Because of the extent of his military service, he was a leader. Because of his intellectual curiosity, he's a visionary. And because of his faith, he has a very strong moral compass. Dean was an employee and he was our friend. He and I had spirited philosophical discussions about everything from democracy to politics and the responsibility that every person has to their country. We talked about faith and the importance that faith has in our lives. We talked a lot about Amherst and how bright the future is for our county. With Dean, the issue never was we can't because, it was we can if. That was how he saw the future. We talked at length about how important it is not to govern by fear, but to govern by optimism. Dean, the board thanks you for your time spent in Amherst. I know this is a stop on what will continue to be a very outstanding career full of service.
Thank you, Mayor.
And now, for the real reason we're here. Commemorative Resolution number 2022-7CR, a commemorative resolution honoring County Administrator Dean C. Rogers for his exceptional service to Amherst County. Be it resolved by the Board of Supervisors by the County of Amherst that whereas Mr. Rogers was appointed County Administrator on August 1st, 2014, and served as such until September 30th, 2022. Whereas he was an agent of positive change for the county and was a phenomenal leader and manager. Whereas he worked for the Economic Development Authority of Amherst County to grow and develop Amherst County, and whereas he was a visionary and spurred his staff towards excellence. Whereas he played a role in the business friendliness initiatives in an effort to attract businesses to Amherst County, and whereas he worked tirelessly to bring broadband internet to the entire county and was not satisfied until every citizen was served. Whereas he navigated the county through the disaster relief response in the wake of the 2018 Elon tornado, whereas he championed the return of the Amherst County Fair in 2018 and was a placemaker who supported quality of life improvements for county citizens, including swimming and recreation at Mill Creek Lake and trail expansion at River Edge Park. Whereas Mr. Rogers was a supporter of facility maintenance and improving and preserving county assets, and whereas he worked tirelessly to save the former Amherst Baptist Church building and establish a successful relationship with Second Stage. Whereas he instituted a successful contractual agreement for legal services that greatly improved professionalism and productivity. Whereas he was instrumental in saving the former Phelps Road School and aiding in the revitalization of the neighborhood, including the future addition of a park for the community. Whereas he helped bring Winton Country Club from near closure and forged a beneficial relationship and contractual agreement to aid in a successful business venture. Whereas he was a visionary, returning to the county government into a cohesive, high-performance organization focused on communication and cooperation between departments and collaborating with outside agencies. Whereas Mr. Rogers oversaw the disbursement of billions of dollars in federal stimulus money allotted for county projects in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas he worked with multiple agencies, especially the Lynchburg Regional Business Alliance and Amherst County EDA, to find funding to aid in the redevelopment of the Central Virginia Training Center, such as the Master Plan Environmental Remediation, and worked with legislators for additional funding to help defease the bonds attached to the facility. Whereas he worked with the staff on the planning and implementation of the new transfer station and maintenance shop, as well as multiple heavy-duty equipment purchases, the closure of the remaining roadside open-air dumps, the opening of 2 convenience centers, and convenience site upgrades throughout the county. Whereas he advocated the county employees be paid the regional market rate for their positions, improving employee salaries during his tenure, and championed their advancement academically and professionally. Whereas he brought greater transparency to county government by publishing public meeting agendas, I'm going to cough in a minute, excuse me, online and broadcasting the meetings. Whereas he established a budget system that streamlined the multifaceted, complicated budget process, Now therefore it be resolved by the Board of Supervisors of the County of Amherst, Virginia, that the Board of Supervisors of the County of Amherst hereby thanks Dean C. Rogers for his service and wishes him well in his future endeavors.
I'm going to take some time and say thank you. This took a lot of people. It took a lot of people to do all of this. And I want to, first off, thank the board for the opportunity to do that. I mean, there's nothing better than to have a job where you feel like you can make a difference. And they ran with it. They ran with a lot of initiatives, and it takes a lot of courage to do that, and I have appreciated that. What people don't realize is what the county has behind the scenes. I mean, our IT director has got experience with the constitutionals, with the payroll, and can keep us all connected. Stacy Wilkes got here, and we didn't even know how much money we had. She's still finding money that was tucked away as she rebuilds our whole accounting system. You know, it's amazing. Eric Bowen now is running the county fair and is doing an amazing job keeping that rolling. Brian Thacker in Public Works. Public Works is a big cost center, but I don't think what people realize is that Public Works is also our biggest savings center. I mean, we have saved more money since Brian arrived than you can count. Joy, who does public affairs and public information, is running the video and the YouTube, puts out press releases at least one a week and multiple Facebooks a day. Brad, welcome. You're part of a powerhouse team. You really are. Poor Nate Young. When he got here, one of the first things he had to do was go into court and lose, because he didn't have the ordinances and he didn't have the team built to win. And now we can take care of the appearance of the county because of what Nate built. And Randy Nixon and Parks and Rec, Recreation and Tourism now, you're about to spend a lot of money. And I hope you make this a really nice place for the county. Linda Warner got here when HR was nothing but a 4-drawer file cabinet that nobody looked in, and has just turned us into a legal operation at the very least. With that, I want to just make the point that, well, first Kristen, who's the center of the hub and makes everything work, and people don't realize it, is amazing. Mark Popovich replaced Mike Lockaby. We now have attorneys that say, yes, here's how, and that makes all the difference. And in my 8 years, the guy I turned to when the public complained was Jeremy Bryant. The guy I turned to deal with the federal projects was Jeremy Bryant. The guy that had to deal with VDOT and understand VDOT was Jeremy Bryant. When I first got here, I went around and I met with every single department head, most of which are not here now. We all have new, but there's a few left, and one of them was Jeremy, and I took notes from each of them. And almost all of these initiatives come from that list that I got from Jeremy Bryant. Jeremy Bryant is the visionary that can take this county forward. And so, I'll give you the lapel pin, man. Thank you. Thanks for taking care of me for 8 years. And good luck to you all. Keep the momentum going.
Thank you.
All right, we have new business. We have the appointment of Public Safety Director. Mr. Brown, I'll let you go ahead and introduce our new Public Safety Director.
Well, luckily, we introduced him at our last meeting, so you should all know Mr. Beam. We have to directly appoint him, so the purpose of tonight is the board shall appoint Director of Public Safety to carry out the responsibilities of that department. The director shall be responsible to the county administrator. Effective upon appointment, the current Director of Public Safety shall also become the Emergency Services Coordinator. When deemed to be necessary by the Board of Supervisors, the responsibility of Emergency Service Coordinator may be divided from those of the Director of Public Safety, and the Emergency Service Coordinator shall be responsible to the Director of Public Safety and shall carry out the responsibilities of the Emergency Management Division of the Department of Public Safety. Mr. Beam, if you'd come up. The recommended motion is that you move that the board appoint Bradley Beam as the Director of Public Safety effective as of the date of hire on October the 24th, 2022.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bryant. Mr. Ayers, would you like to make that motion?
Move that the board appoint Bradley Beam as Director of Public Safety effective as of the date of hire on October the 24th, 2022.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So you might as well stay up there because I think you're next on the agenda. Congratulations, and we look forward to working with you. I know you have a tough job, but we welcome you and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Great team here. So I'm before you tonight to talk about a potential change to our schedule. Currently, our staff works a 24, 48-hour schedule. In recent years, especially since the pandemic, we've seen a lot of challenges recruiting and retaining employees. So staff prior to my arrival had been looking for a niche, something to try and retain employees, recruit employees, and have them select Amherst County as their home. And I'm sorry, go back, I'm sorry. I don't have my pointer, sorry. We're similar to other localities, Lynchburg, Campbell County, Bedford, and many other localities. Lynchburg, their niche is they may ride a fire truck today, they're on an ambulance tomorrow, they may be on a specialty team. For many years, Amherst County had that niche in what we commonly refer to in the streets as county EMS. It was just a different version of EMS. You're out in the county, you're serving the rural communities, your transport times are longer, you have more time to do those treatments and really be a refined paramedic. Fortunately or unfortunately, other localities have now gone to similar career staffing as Amherst County, so we kind of lost that niche. So we think that this schedule change that we've requested, going from a 24-48 to a 24-72, will give us that niche. And this timeline I won't read verbatim. It was really good for me. It was prepared by by my colleagues Ben and Jared. They've done a great job of getting me up to speed, and you can kind of see where we are and how we've gotten here. I really draw your attention to that last line. Is increasingly we've had to use the captain to fill in position on the ambulance to try and reduce having a lot of mandatory overtime and holdover of our employees. And then the one thing that I'll also call attention to is our part-time employees have diminished. What we found, especially since the pandemic, is everybody is challenged with staffing. So where our part-time employees may work for a city or for another county full-time and for us part-time, they started getting called in to work full-time or work overtime in their primary jurisdiction. So we've seen the decrease in them, in people wanting to work part-time for us, just as everyone else has seen the same thing. Currently, we're allotted 27 full-time positions in what we would call the EMS operations side. There's 3 captains, 12 paramedics, or 12 ALS providers, and 12 BLS providers. Basic life support, if you would. Advanced life support, here we're indicating with paramedics. Currently, we have about 6 paramedic or ALS vacancies. We are conducting interviews right now, but a lot of those positions have remained vacant over a long period of time, and a lot of that's had to do with the pandemic. Healthcare workers have really been in strain, and there's been this decrease in new blood, if you would, coming into to the profession. So that's kind of been pretty steady, and pretty alarming that we've lost 41 full-time employees and 18 part-time since 2018. And again, a lot of that is part-time having to pull more time at their full-time job, and then other people going to other locations because maybe they paid a little more or they had the niche. So we're hopeful that this will be Amherst County's niche to draw folks in. Department survey, there was an informal survey that went out to employees prior to my arrival, but I think it really gleaned a lot of good information to us, and that was overwhelming majority would prefer 24/72 as the schedule of choice. And so they looked at a lot of different schedules, including 12-hour shifts, which is what a lot of law enforcement and our dispatchers work. And what we found, what we proposed to you today, the 24/72, is actually the same amount of employees and the same amount of shifts as 12-hour shifts, but by doing the 24/72, it gives you that more work-life balance. So same number of employees to try and do 12-hour shifts, but this just breaks up their time off into larger clumps of time. So in March of 2022, the 4th Medic Unit was temporarily discontinued due to inadequate staffing. That 4th Medic Unit I know has really been important to this board and to the county in general, and that was the Eland Station. There's been a lot of effort to get that up and going, and the board has really supported that. But because of staffing, all that could be staffed was the 3 ambulances. So that 4th Medic Unit was discontinued in March of 2022. So what are we requesting today? What we're here for is the switch to the 24/72, and the big reason is recruitment and retention. We think that'll help a whole lot. And what that requires from our ask of you would be one additional captain right now. That's today's request, as well as the other allotted FTEs that we already have to be dispersed to the 4 shifts. The plan would be for that 4th captain position in working with our finance department. The funding is there this current year due to positions that haven't been filled, that we could fill that captain position in the early 2023 and have enough funding in our budget to remain for the remainder of the fiscal year. Then we would start the advertisement for that 4th captain. We would begin the process to try and fill those vacancies that we have. It says 7 here, but we were able to update it because it's only 6, which is really good. And then anticipated filling those vacancies between January and March of 2023. Future request, again, I know it's really important to this group, important to the county, and definitely a need is for that 4th ambulance, that 4th truck that we've talked about. So our recommendation, or what we would ask, would be to maybe come back next year, approximately 2024, ask to apply for the SAFER grant. The SAFER is a grant funding through the federal government. It's incremental. It goes down, decreases each year, starts at 90% funding, and decreases over that 5-year period of time. What I'll tell you with that is, unfortunately, it's not guaranteed. It's very competitive. Fire departments all across the country, localities, counties such as ours, are applying for those type grants, and it's extremely competitive. But that would be for 8 EMS/firefighter positions. That would be approximately $455,000 of additional funds that would be requested for that, and that would go up or down based on benefits, working with Linda and so forth, but that's kind of the target range we think that would come in at. So our ask today, or our pros and cons, and we'll talk about our ask, stabilize staffing. We think this will do that with the 24/72. We think it gives Amherst that unique niche that we talked about, and it really gives our employees a better work-life balance, which we know is really important to today's workforce. Probably important to all of us, but especially the new people coming to the workforce. We see that really is the thing that appeals to them to coming into public safety. Con, again, it does temporarily pause that 4th ambulance staffing, which again is very important to this board, and I can attest in my 3 weeks here is definitely something that we need in this county. I can't tell you the number of times that 3 trucks just doesn't cover it. But the unfortunate part has been we've really struggled to fill the positions for 3 trucks, so a 4th truck without a change in the scheduling we think would be pretty tough for us. It does require today's ask, which would be approximately $90,000 for the captain position in years going forward. We have enough staffing otherwise already in our FTEs that we can make it work with that one additional position. And then there may be additional adjustments needed for our overtime budget in the future. It's a very tricky one because we're hopeful as we recruit people in and we fill our spots, our full-time employees are having to work less overtime. So we just don't know where that lands, but we're pretty optimistic about that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I've thrown a lot at you, so a lot of numbers and moving parts.
Ms. Beal, I've got a question.
Go ahead.
You and I had talked about this when you first arrived, and I love the idea, but what keeps Lynchburg from also doing this niche, or Bedford or Campbell?
So, well, the problem I think for Lynchburg is there's such a large department. To add another shift would really be cost prohibitive for them, because I think they're running, and somebody correct me, like 9 stations. I may be totally off base, but when you start equating that out and you're trying to staff that over a 4th shift, it would be extremely costly for them. There are places that do it. I think Loudoun County, Virginia does it, and I think DC Fire Department does it, but I think those are some of the more departments I'm aware of.
Yeah, that's kind of my concern. I mean, it's a big financial obligation for this county as well.
Yes, sir.
I mean, you're talking, it's $455,000, almost $456,000, and I guess, does that number include the $90,000 for the captain, or would that be an addition?
No, sir, those are 2 different asks.
Okay.
The captain would be for now, and that additional, just under $500,000 would be for a 4th truck at a later time, or whenever the board felt.
Yeah, I don't know what that would be as far as the tax increase, what that would equate to. It'd probably be around 3 cent, 2 to 3 cent additional. Yeah. You know, I'm fine with adding the position. I know we need it, if we can find someone to fill it, but I'm just hesitant because the other localities, no one else is using this. And you might be right. I'm not saying you aren't
Sure.
right. You may be right. But it certainly is a big ask. Go ahead.
I believe Buckingham might be doing it now. I think they just started.
They may be one of the newer agencies that are doing
Yeah, I
it.
was trying to get one of our paramedics that left back that just went to Buckingham. I mean, like, well, yeah, okay. So this is the way I look at it. So, well, first question is, how much mandatory overtime are we doing right now?
We're using quite a bit of mandatory overtime. So our agency in nature is built flat to begin with. So meaning if we have 8 positions that need to be filled today, there are only 8 people assigned to that shift. In some larger departments, you may have you would have 12, and so there's room for people to be off vacation. And so it really hits us is when our employees are taking time off, or they're out sick, or we lose someone. Those positions, if they can't be filled by a part-timer, which again is increasingly becoming more difficult, then we're having to pay overtime. So essentially daily, there's probably someone that's working overtime most every day.
And that's not hey, I want to pick up some overtime. That's you got to stay.
So we've tried to do that. We've tried to reduce the mandatory, and quite frankly, we've done better with that recently. People are volunteering to pick up, but there still are mandatory holds, which unfortunately is the tough part.
Everybody likes. So I guess this is the way I look at it. We've been chasing the 4th medic unit for quite a few years, and we've never quite got there. And I'm not sure. I think you said you paused it in March.
I think that's the.
But that was kind of a power shift anyway, right? We've never had 4 full-time medic units on the street.
Yes, sir.
That's because we've never been up to staff to do that. So we don't have a 4th medic unit anyway because we can't get the staffing levels to where they need to be. Right? So, you know, I see hiring this captain and going to this 2472. It is a niche, and I just got back from the EMS symposium, and the people I talked to down there, yeah, they love to work a 2472 shift. But so I think it would make us very competitive in the market. yeah, Mr. Pugh's right. If we do want to get that fourth medic unit, then we're going to have to come up with the staff, but we don't have it anyway, so it's a chicken or the egg, right? The other thing that really concerns me is the amount of wear and tear we're putting on the employees we have, right? You know, working these 24-hour shifts, sleep deprivation, all time of night, the work that they do is hard work, and they're dealing with our citizens in their greatest time of need, and, you know, quite frankly, I think we need to create the best work environment that we can for them. So, while I want that fourth medic unit, I think right now what I want more is a fully staffed organization. So I would support going to that.
Mr. Chairman, I've been around county and public service pretty much my entire life, from the EMS side to the law enforcement side, and back in the early days, helped the fire department out on several occasions. I remember several years ago when the county was all volunteer fire and EMS, that we saw the need of paid EMS coming. We could see it. We just never wanted to step forward and acknowledge that we needed to make provisions to take care of that, as the need was quickly coming upon us. I recall that we lost some lives in this county because of lack of daylight coverage. We just did not have the volunteers to do it. I'm proud to say that the sheriff's office stepped up to the plate, and we covered probably 90 to 95% of those calls, daylight calls, for approximately 2.5 years until the county could get the finances in order to start the paid EMS system. At that time, it was daylight only. One I can say is, if you listen to the radio, we depend on Lynchburg quite a bit to take care of us. The three of our board members here, I know myself, Ms. Tucker, and part of Mr. Martin's district is in rural part of Amherst County. If you will listen, a lot of times, those 3 units that we have running are in the southern end of the county, leaving our citizens up here in the rural section, not uncovered by any means of what I'm saying, but the unit at Peddler Station a lot of times is up this way or down that way, taking care of the cost for service. We have to realize we just approved 2 major housing developments that are coming within probably the next 5 years. Do we wait 5 years to make the provisions to take care of these people? No, we start now. You cannot put a value on the life of our people. Health, safety, and welfare of our people should be this board's priority. And, you know, the fourth medic unit, yes, we need to start working on that now. Asking as we move into the budget season over the next 12 months, 24 months, how do we fund this? How do we get the people to manage it and take care of it? You know, a lot of times when we look at the captain's position now to create the 24/72, to folks that do public service, a lot of times an extra day off is worth more to them than an extra dollar. You have to figure with what these people deal with day in and day out, a lot of people do not want any parts of what they do. And they have to be recognized for their efforts. And I think we need to do the right thing and create this niche that we are attractive to men and women that want to do public service and want to come here to do that because we look out for our people.
Thank you, Mr. Ayers. I don't disagree, with what you said. You know, I tend to agree, but also some of the things that I think about is, households in the county are facing financial hardships due to rising cost. You know, food, the level of inflation remains at its high as it's been in 40 years. Food and energy prices have remained very high. Lower income families have less discretionary income. Based upon inflation, from what I've gleaned, it's costing the average household anywhere between $8,000 and $11,000 a year in order to maintain the same standard of living as previous years. So these are some of the things that I think about as well. I do see that we have a problem with maintaining. Well, when you look at the turnover, you say, well, there's a problem. What is it? You know, there could be a plethora of reasons to figure that out. You know, whether it's working conditions or whatnot. I don't want to get into all the other reasons it could have been or may be. We just hired a new public safety director. I would like to see us get those positions staffed, but it's better to have 3 working ambulances, like Mr. Martin said, than to try to get a 4th we don't know whether we're going to get or not. It's hard to get people to work whatever profession it is at this point in time. So, I mean, I'll support the position and I'll get the change, but the $455,000 next year is going to be a major discussion going forward. I don't know where that's going to lead, but it's certainly something that I've had a lot of people still calling me about the prices of their personal property. You know, how much did the car taxes have went up? We got a school system that may be asking for additional funds as well. So it's going to be a balancing act. I mean, you know, certainly we can't do everything all the time. We can't do it. We got to figure out our priorities, but that's kind of where I sit.
Mr. Pugh, I'd like to make a motion. I move that the board allocate the recurring funds in an amount not to exceed $90,000 for salary and benefits for a 4th captain's position for fiscal year '23 and permit staff to hire for that position immediately with funding available in the department.
Can I make a friendly amendment to that? That we authorize Mr. Chief Beam to apply for that SAFER grant whenever that becomes available.
I accept Mr. Martin's amendment.
Motion on the floor by Mrs. Tucker. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, thank you, Mr. Bean.
I hear those applications coming in right now.
All right, well, we hope. Okay, next we have County Administrator's Report. Mr. Bryant?
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Popovich, you have some information?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, at this time, I wanted to give the board as well as the public some kind of understanding about how opioid settlement funds are being distributed throughout the state. You've already heard about the settlement with the 3 distributors and with Janssen, the manufacturer. There has also been a recent announcement that Walmart and CVS have agreed in principle to a settlement, which still needs to be approved by all the litigating parties, but that's another chunk of money that will start flowing through the system. The historical background is pretty straightforward. This has been going on, the opioid epidemic started back, I would say probably about 2010, and just got progressively worse. So 133 of the localities in the Commonwealth of Virginia joined up and filed lawsuits against all of the manufacturers and distributors of opioids in order to recoup funds that they were having to expend to deal with this problem. Earlier this year, we did reach those settlements that I mentioned earlier, and based on discussions that the localities had at the time with the Attorney General's office, we were able to all agree on a path forward on how those funds would be distributed. And so this is a flow chart of how that works, but I'm not going to read to you every individual thing. If you go to the next slide, the basic principle is going to be that the overall amount reached from each settlement will be distributed 30% to the localities, 15% to the state, and the remaining 55% is going to the newly created abatement authority. The abatement authority in and of itself then splits up its monies to give directly to localities and or regional groups and or other expenditures as they deem appropriate. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. You recently received, or I know the county administrator recently received a letter from the Opioid Abatement Authority describing a new policy that was recently adopted in which if a locality agrees to expend all of its funds solely for opioid abatement purposes, the authority will grant the locality an additional 25% allotment of its funds. That's an incentive to try and focus expenditure of the funds solely on abatement purposes.
The reality is that some of these monies are considered restricted and solely for abatement purposes, and others are unrestricted, and localities are free to use them as they see fit. The strategy at this point in time, though, from a legal perspective, the recommendation that has been given to all localities is that for purposes of these early years, localities focus on spending the money solely on abatement purposes, because we are unclear as to how localities will be audited to determine how those monies were spent, all right? And we don't want you all getting in trouble from audit purposes, but also because there continues to be ongoing litigation, we don't want those folks that have not settled yet to point to a particular locality and say, see, we're not settling because they're spending the money on something that's not even related to opioid abatement. So the good news is that if you follow our advice and solely spend those funds on the opioid abatement actions or efforts, you're going to get an additional 25%. So it's kind of icing on the cake, so to speak. So I want to let you all know that with the distributor and Janssen agreements in place, Amherst is scheduled to receive close to $500,000 over the next 16 years. So that's a good chunk of money. And so also expect, like I said, there's additional settlements coming down the pike, so there will be additional monies added on to that. I have provided the staff with a list of approved opioid expenditure options, so they can, run through the gamut of those options, and obviously with your direction to decide how best to spend those funds.
Mr. Popovich, would that include law enforcement, funding law enforcement, or any of that? I mean, it seems like you get the money, but then you've got to spend it on opioid abatement. So what does that mean? You go and give money to nonprofit organizations to do?
Not necessarily, no. You can use it for purposes of hiring additional folks to deal with opioid addiction. You can hire certain staffers to deal specifically with opioid issues and how they're dealt with in your locality. It can be used for a wide variety of things. The list that I've provided is pretty extensive. And as long as you can connect it to opioid abatement in some way, shape, or form, it's probably okay to spend.
I mean, it's one-time money, though, so you don't really want to have a reoccurring expense where you have to hire someone to do that.
Exactly. So you usually are, a majority of the funds, I will say this, from the localities that I've been dealing with, most of those localities have been expending the funds on improving their drug courts or starting up a drug court, because that then reduces the cost of prison and jails and all those additional expenditures that localities have to go through. It's an option. But again, staff will have to go through the list of approved expenditures and, maybe make some presentation or recommendation to you all on what they think would be the best and most efficient use of those funds.
All right.
But I just want to give that little brief update.
So staff's going to come back to the board with recommendations, is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
All right. So that's all you have for us?
That is it, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Popovich. Next, we'll go to liaison and committee reports. Ms. Tucker, do you have anything?
I'm going to wait we've got someone here from the Ag Committee that I think is going to give a final report, so I'll include that there. The only thing that I will add is that on the facility, the ball is still in Nelson's court.
All righty. The next one is the Blue Ridge Regional Jail. That's just for information unless you have questions. School board, anything on the school board? Ms. Tucker?
No.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to departmental reports. Of course, the treasurer's report, if you have any questions. If not, we'll go ahead and invite the agricultural committee up here, Mr. Floyd, to give your annual report.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and ask Eric Bowen to come on up. He is literally the right hand of the Ag Committee. Most of you see him running around at the fair doing everything. Before I talk about the fair, just want to get started with, first off, thank the board for supporting us. This is my 4th year on the Ag Committee. This is my 4th year as chairman of the Ag Committee, and I just want to thank y'all for 4 great years. Y'all have put us with some great people to work with over the years. Claudia, I want to thank you personally for being our liaison and working with us hand in hand. Mr. Pugh stepped out. I want to thank him for putting me on this committee to begin with, because it has been a joy to work with everybody and work with the board. A little bit about, as you know, we had a rollover and we have some new members this year. We had a meeting last night. We actually broke the charter back out for our new members and our old members alike and went over step by step everything that y'all put in that charter for us. And I want you to know that next year, whomever is in charge of that committee, it's going to be a great year, because everybody on that committee was talking last night and looking forward to next year. We're going to be more productive as far as getting youth involved. 2 reasons I asked Eric to come up here. Of course, being cooperative extension agent, we on that committee has gone out into the community and asked people, what do you want to see done? What type of things do you want in your community? Before we came in tonight, Eric let me know that partnership, one of the things we asked to do was more home canning, things like that. Partnership with Eric, he's going to promote a thing with Second Stage to where they're going to put something on next month, I believe it is, and he's going to put flyers out for that. We're going to help promote that. We have some springtime things coming up to promote. So, you know, the future is looking positive for us. Let's see. The second reason I called Eric up here is because literally, as I was sitting here tonight, this piece of paper was handed to me, and this is just the statistics for the 2022 fair. I have not had time to necessarily go over these. What I'd like to do is pass these out to everyone. This is for your information to just take a look at it. If I don't feel that we're quite ready to answer a ton of questions about this, if you see something that, you know, we need to come up with tonight, of course, Eric can more than likely answer. But this is just to show you a little bit about the statistics for the 2022 fair. Of course, this year we were fighting some obstacles. The biggest obstacle, I think, was we had homecoming for the football game and homecoming dance the same weekend. A lot of other events in the community was going on, and still, I believe, in talking with Mr. Falk, our attendance for the fair was within 800 people of last year. So that's pretty good. Like you mentioned earlier, price of everything has gone up, so it was an uphill battle. But all in all, you know, according to this, we came out a little bit better to the positive than to the negative. And I think at a future date, once we actually sit down and get all the final bills in, we'll be in a better place to come before you and answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, the weather didn't exactly help neither. We got a real cold snap right there when the down in the 30s or whatever it was at night, so that probably kept some people away.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What is the plan? Have you discussed like a date, a similar date next year, maybe moving that date maybe earlier, or?
Our date, the date we have is pretty dependent on the Midway. And we were lucky to get the Midway we did when we lost our previous Midway, and that was the date they had available. So pretty much, unless we hear that y'all want to change something and look for a new Midway, then that's pretty much the date we have. We discussed last night some ideas moving forward to help us. And like I said, last night was just a discussion, so I don't want to bring that up right now,
Oh, yeah.
but
I just didn't know, I'm fine with the time, it just so happened that it's kind of unusual for the weather to be that cool.
Yes, sir.
So,
did you want to speak to the fair or anything? And I'll be the first to admit, the main reason I'm not speaking to the fair is because of job obligations. I was not at the fair. I think I drove up there 3 times and checked on Eric, and I did not want to stop a working man working, so.
I mean, I can just share with you all at the fair, you've got the numbers overall. We have a few additional expenses this year, but the early numbers are showing based on attendance, revenue, we're tracking about where we would have been last year. We realized from last year we had additional lighting needs, which was a huge expense. We added a new family-friendly attraction to offer some variety to it. So when we add in those 2 additional expenses, if they would have stayed on the revenue side, we'd have tracked about where we were last year. So the Agriculture Committee downplays their part. I run forth and carry out tasks that they ask of me when the push comes to shove to make sure everything's in place. All these members that you have on the Ag Committee step forward, make sure I'm staying straight, and take care of the 5 million little pieces that have slipped through the cracks, or I'm having to deal with other problems. So between our volunteers and the Ag Committee, they work tirelessly, and I hate to think how many hours they put in to trying to get ready for it. As far as, Mr. Chairman Pugh, your question, like Jeff said, currently we're set for the 4th weekend in October. When we saw out the new Midway, they actually added an additional date to Virginia to handle us. So it's a little harder to move it, and it seems to be tough, in all honesty, the balance of heat, cold. If we get back into September, I'm not so sure that the weather is not even a greater risk to us. Interestingly enough, based on the current numbers we were looking at today, Friday was really the only day that we took a big hit on attendance. And most of that's attributed to the homecoming football game. So the numbers were coming close. So we were tracking, actually our Saturday and Sunday went up to handle that loss on Friday.
all right. Any questions, comments?
We appreciate y'all. I mean,
Yeah, a lot of work, appreciate
Eric,
it.
you were running around like a dog with his tongue hanging out, so we really appreciate everything that y'all have done.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, I mean, yeah. Seeing you out there and all the county staff and volunteers, a lot of hard work. I think it was a great event, has been. You continue to build upon on it. And my comment here, I don't want to take away from any of that, yet at our last meeting, and I know this board has received several emails from people that raised some concerns about some of the merchandise. So hopefully you guys will maybe look at that a little bit closer next year and see what we can do about that.
Yeah, so those have been shared with me, and I've had some conversations. The way our meeting ran last evening, we broached it. It will be brought back up with our December 8th fair after meeting and Ag Committee meeting to delve into that a little bit further.
Awesome, but again, I cannot stress enough how great of an event that is. And thank you for all the work you put in it.
Well, thank you all for your all support.
And that's a tough thing to broach, what Mr. Martin was talking about, because who is the judge of something that is or isn't, you know, it's hard to determine what that is and what that isn't. So, I mean, I'll have a tough job to do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And before I step away, you had stepped out, Mr. Pugh. I thank the board. This is my 4th year on this committee and 4th year as chairman. And I think with my term ending, I just want to thank you personally for putting me on this committee, sir. And I appreciate everything that y'all have done for us.
Well, I'm sure we can find other committees for you.
Yeah, we appreciate what you've done, taking your time out from your own schedule and doing this. So we appreciate your service to the county. You know, it's a lot to do and to deal with, and we commend you for your effort and your time.
Thank you.
Thank both of you guys. Appreciate it a lot.
All right, we'll move on to citizen comment. Is anyone wishing to speak at this time? All right. Please state your name and district for the record.
Sam Bryant, District 1, Tom Martin's my supervisor. Thanks for having me up. I didn't want to beat up on the solar guys because I wasn't really caught up on what they were doing, but and I've talked to Jeremy about this. He knows my sentiment on it. I'd like to read this. I think Tom will be interested in it. A study by U.S.-based fire suppression technology company Fire Trace International said that there has been a steep rise in the number of solar farm fires. Reinsurance News reported the study highlights some of the most potential causes of the solar farm fires, the high likelihood of the underreporting of such incidents, which hinders accurate assessment and solar farm risks. I would ask that the people that do solar give our volunteer firefighters, which we all rely on, some training. I would say this is the second one that the board's approved. It takes the place of animals that provide food for people and animals and vegetables. Ride down Route 40 to go to Martinsville and see what happened in Pennsylvania County. Take a look at that. It's pretty ugly. I do a fair amount of flying now, and I get to see it, and I can tell you when I'm flying the airplane, it glares right in my eyes. So I stay away from those areas. And I wish those guys were here talking about that. Just keep us safe, make the good decisions that you do, and know that there's always a rest benefit with this. Thank you for supporting public safety. I know that Mr. Tom Ford sat in those seats, and what Jimmy was talking about when the sheriff's office was running all the calls, and I was a volunteer and also working in Lynchburg, that was a big impact. But Tom was able to move public safety forward, and he was unfortunately one of the people that didn't get an ambulance close enough, and he was very sick. So I hate to see someone wait every day, and I have a radio, and I'm volunteering again. Those 3 trucks are tied up, and seconds count in everything we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close citizen comments, and we'll go to matters from members of the board. Mr. Wade?
Nothing, sir.
Mrs. Tucker?
I don't have anything.
Mr. Ayers?
No, sir.
Mr. Martin?
No, sir.
And I have nothing. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor say aye. Aye.